$450 million. That's the empire. The businesses, the brand deals, the media company, the investments. $450 million built by a kid from Mogi Das. Cruisers whose family once had the electricity cut off because they couldn't pay the bill. But here's what makes this story different from every other billionaire story you've ever heard. 3 years ago, most people had already written Neymar off. The injuries, the scandals, the weight, the parties, every sports analyst, every business magazine, every comment section in the world had already typed the same sentence. His time is over. And then today, Brazil called him up for the 2026 World Cup. 1 goal. That's all he needs. 1 goal in the United States, and Neymar Jr. ties Pelé as Brazil's all-time top scorer. The greatest number in Brazilian football history, shared with the greatest player who ever lived. The empire didn't just survive. It's about to conquer the one thing it was always built for. Stay with me, because the way this story almost ended is far more interesting than the way it's ending now. Stay until chapter 4, because the $450 million is not the most surprising part of this story. What he built during the years everyone forgot about him is, before Neymar signed a single business contract, before any investor put money near his name, his brand was already worth more than most Brazilian companies. At 21 years old, still at Santos, still years before Europe, market analysts valued his personal brand at over $90 million. Not his salary, his name, just a name. In 2005, that name meant absolutely nothing outside a small street in Mogi Das Cruzes. His father was a former semi-professional player, driving a car that broke down more than it ran. The family lived in a small house. Neymar was 11 years old, playing futsal barefoot, and the only thing separating him from every other kid in Brazil was that he was embarrassingly better than everyone around him. Santos signed him at 14. By 17, he was already being compared to Ronaldinho. But here's what most people miss. His father saw what was happening and made one decision that changed everything. He didn't just hire an agent. He built a company. Neymar Sports E-Marketing was created when Neymar was still a teenager. His father became his business partner. Every deal, every sponsorship, every handshake went through that structure. Nike came first, then Panasonic, then Claro. By the time Barcelona paid €88 million to bring him to Europe in 2013, Neymar wasn't just a footballer arriving in Spain. He was a brand arriving with a fully built business machine behind him. The move to Barcelona didn't just make him famous, it made him global. And global, for a brand, means something very specific. It means you stop selling to one country and start selling to every country at once. Endorsement deals multiplied. The name became a product, and the product had no expiration date attached to it. Most athletes make money and then try to build a brand. Neymar built the brand first and let the money follow. That's not luck. That's architecture. In 2017, Paris Saint-Germain paid €222 million to sign Neymar, the most expensive transfer in the history of football. Not by a little, by double. The previous record was $105 million. PSG didn't break the record, they destroyed it. At Barcelona, Neymar was the third name on the poster, behind Messi, behind the institution, behind 100 years of history. He was brilliant, he was essential, and he was invisible at the same time. The brand was growing, but the ceiling was obvious. Paris changed the equation completely. In France, Neymar wasn't third, he wasn't second. He was the reason people watched. PSG handed him the biggest contract in football history, €360 million, over 5 years. When you include signing bonuses, the brand deals that followed were proportional. Nike renegotiated. Red Bull expanded their partnership. A global media deal with a streaming platform. His own content studio. His own record label. Neymar became less of a name and more of a media ecosystem. But Paris also became the beginning of the collapse that almost took everything with it. The injuries started there. The criticism started there. The narrative that Neymar was more interested in parties than in football, that started in Paris too. And when you're €222 million of someone else's money, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. The biggest deal of your life can be the best thing and the worst thing simultaneously. Paris gave Neymar the platform to build an empire. Paris also gave him enough rope to hang it. Between 2019 and 2023, Neymar played fewer than 150 games for PSG in 4 years. For context, a fit player at a top club plays that in 2 seasons. He was disappearing from the pitch. And when a brand disappears from the pitch, it starts disappearing everywhere else. The injuries were real. The cruciate ligament, the ankle, the metatarsal, the hamstring. The body was sending the same message repeatedly, and Neymar kept ignoring it. But the business world doesn't care about medical reports. Sponsors care about visibility. And visibility requires showing up. Here's what nobody reported while everyone was writing his obituary. The business didn't stop. While Neymar was recovering from surgery again, his team was building. Neymar Jr. instituted his social project in Brazil, expanded to serve over 10,000 children. His gaming brand, Neymar Jr. X Puma, in gaming tournaments. His Twitch channel. His investments in Brazilian startups. None of that needed him to be on a pitch. The machine kept running because it had been built to run without him. He moved to Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia in 2023, 50 million euros per year. The football world laughed, said he was finished, said Saudi Arabia was where careers went to retire with dignity. Then he tore his ACL, 4 games in, and spent the entire season out. But the 50 million per year kept coming, and the brand, instead of dying in the desert, quietly rebuilt itself, away from the noise of European football, away from the weekly scrutiny. In the silence, the team restructured the business, renegotiated deals, and positioned everything for one final act. An empire built correctly doesn't need its founder to be present every day. The years Neymar was invisible were the years the foundation got stronger. Absence, when used correctly, is a strategy. 77 goals. That's what Pele scored for Brazil. For decades, that number sat untouched, sacred. The kind of record that felt permanent because the man behind it felt permanent. And then, quietly, across tournaments and qualifiers and friendlies, Neymar started climbing toward it. He's at 79 now. When Neymar first broke into the national team, the comparison to Pele was considered almost disrespectful to Pele, the greatest player in history, versus a flashy kid with trick moves and a mohawk. Brazil has always had complicated feelings about Neymar. Too commercial, to Hollywood, not serious enough, not humble enough, not Pele enough. And yet the goals kept coming. World Cup after World Cup, Copa America after Copa America. Through the scandals, through the injury absences, through the defeats that broke the country's heart, and some the people blamed on him personally. The 2014 World Cup semi-final, 7-1 against Germany, on home soil, with Neymar watching from a hospital bed with a fractured vertebra. That image, Neymar crying on a stretcher, being carried off the pitch, became the symbol of everything. The fragility, the dependency, the weight of a nation placed on one man's spine, literally. But here's what that moment actually did to the brand. It humanized him in a way that no marketing campaign ever could. Brazil had spent years debating whether Neymar deserved the adoration. After that stretcher, they stopped debating. The commercial became personal. The brand became emotional. And emotional connections with a fan base are worth more than any endorsement deal you can put a number on. Sometimes the moment that breaks you publicly is the moment that makes you permanent. Neymar, on that stretcher, wasn't the end of the brand. It was the beginning of something that money genuinely cannot buy. Now that you know how this empire was built, do you think Neymar deserves to share that record with Pele? Or did too much happen along the way? Drop your verdict in the comments. Today, Brazil called Neymar up for the 2026 World Cup in the United States. Against every prediction, against every analyst, against every comment section that had already written the farewell post. He's going. 6 months ago, this felt impossible. The ACL recovery, the age, 33 years old, in a sport that treats 30 like the beginning of the end. Other players his age are already doing retirement tours and releasing autobiographies. Neymar was doing physiotherapy and posting gym videos that nobody was sure whether to believe. But the body came back, slowly, then all at once. The Brazilian national team staff monitored every session. The coaching staff made the call. And today that call became official. Neymar Jr. is going to the United States for the biggest tournament in the world. One goal, that's the number. One goal, and he stands next to Pele in the record books forever. Not behind him. Next to him, the kid from Mogi das Cruzes and the king from Trascorax, equal in the only statistic that Brazil has ever truly cared about. And understand what that moment does to a $450 million empire. It doesn't just validate it. It completes it. Every business deal, every brand partnership, every investment made in his name for the last 15 years was always building toward a moment that could make the whole story make sense. This is that moment. Here's the thing about Neymar that the business world understood long before the football world admitted it. The brand was never really about the goals. It was about the story. And a story needs an ending that justifies everything that came before it. The injuries, the scandals, the doubts, the Saudi Arabia chapter that everyone laughed at. All of it, every single painful chapter, becomes prologue if he scores that goal in the United States. $450 million, says he will. The most valuable brands in the world aren't the ones that never fail. They're the ones that fail visibly, survive publicly, and come back at exactly the right moment. Neymar didn't build an empire despite the chaos. He built it through it. Here's what this story actually is. It's not a story about football. It's not even a story about money. It's a story about what happens when a brand is built correctly from the very beginning, with structure, with patience, and with enough emotional depth that the audience never fully lets go. At the start of this video, $450 million sounded like the number that defined Neymar, but it doesn't. The number that defines him is the 2 goals he needs to become Brazil's undisputed all-time top scorer. One already in the bank, one waiting in the United States. Everything else, the empire, the deals, the businesses, the brand, that's just the architecture around a story that was always heading here. Now here's the question I want to leave with you. If Neymar scores that goal, if he stands on that pitch in the United States, and ties Pele does, the chaos of the last 10 years get forgiven. Does the empire finally make complete sense? Or was it always going to end this way, no matter what happened in between? Next video, the 50 billion media empire that no conglomerate will ever absorb. The Arnault family, and that story is even stranger than this one sounds. Subscribe, it drops this week. See you in the next one.